Hi and welcome to this week's episode of Land Rovers Live. As always, I'm Matt, and coming up on today's show, we've got part 2 in the series of Sean Conway, this week on Big Adventures. Then we hear from frontrunners Sally Pawlowski on Small Adventures. Our workshop this guide will be on cooling systems, and specifically waterless coolants by Evans. But first, last weekend, Birmingham Land Rover Group held their annual cake run. This is like a Land Rover rally, but you bring along your own cakes. It's great fun, and they started in Birmingham in the Midlands in the UK and went just up the road to RAF Cosford. We sent Amy along to see how they got on.
It's Sunday, it's cold and it's early, but hey, we're off on a Land Rover cake run. We start in Birmingham, then head up in convoy to Cosford RAF Museum. This cake run is organised by Birmingham Land Rover Group and welcome every landy owner near and far to join in. If planes aren't your thing, you can hang back and just enjoy the cake. And trust me, there was a lot of cake.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
After everyone stuffed themselves silly,
I'm not eating your cake, no!
it's time to head home. Some of us opt for a few lanes on our return.
So that was Birmingham Land Rover Group's annual cake run. If you or your Land Rover Group have got any events planned or anything that you think could be of interest to somebody else, do let us know. We'll put the links on the screen for that and we'd love to hear from you. Now, coming up in this week's workshop, we take a look at cooling systems, and in specific the problems that water can cause, and how we've solved them with Evans waterless coolant. So let's head over to Black Country 4x4 and see. We're back here at Black Country 4x4 this week to take a look at cooling systems. No matter if your landy runs on petrol or diesel, they all have cooling systems that look something like this. Quite simply, hot water from around the engine is cooled in the radiator and then the cycle continues. As you can see here, there are lots of different parts and much that can go wrong with those parts. When cooling systems go wrong, it can be expensive. Under many different conditions, the water can boil over quite quickly. The steam increases pressure and will find the easiest way to escape, usually through pipe joints or head gaskets, damaging your engine along the way. And when the temperature drops too low,
with the winter you could get problems with freezing. Obviously water freezes in the water jacket, expands and cracks the block.
Antifreeze can stop this, but
It's not very environmentally friendly at all for animals and other things, stuff like that.
yeah, I've seen plenty of reports of it, cats dying and such.
Yeah.
So we found a different solution to that, and that's to run Evans waterless coolant. Evans waterless coolants, as the name suggests, do not have water in them, and as such they remove the problems associated with freezing and boiling. The boiling point is above 180 degrees centigrade, eliminating overheating. Because of that, the pressure in the system is far lower, so the stress on the cooling system overall is reduced, and with a freezing point of minus 40 degrees Celsius, antifreeze is also a thing of the past for most. The other bonus of not running water around the system is rust. There won't be any here, and Evans claim to prevent corrosion and stop erosion. This stuff will last for over 20 years and is non-toxic. What's not to like? We've started this process by draining out the cooling system, and we've gone a bit further here, because we don't plan on changing the new coolant for 20 years or so we've replaced all the pipes with silicone ones, because they look nice. Now let's see the state of the old ones.
We've taken the pipes off of the car, and to be fair, they're not that bad. You can see a slight bit of rusty water inside where the inside of the engine maybe started to corrode due to the antifreeze and stuff. But they're generally not too bad. I mean, we've got one here that we've taken off another vehicle, and you can see that the water and the antifreeze has started to perish the edges of the rubber, right through to the outside, to be honest. I mean, you can see where the water's come through.
What other things would we be looking for on our pipes if people at home are taking notes? Where the Jubilee clips are?
Yeah, any splits towards the edges that can maybe go underneath the Jubilee clip, or any splits around where it sits, you can see where it's gone in there, where it's been under that much pressure, and then just generally wear and tear and split there.
So would you recommend changing these pipes?
Yeah, I'd just recommend changing them, yeah. New pipes, new antifreeze, new everything.
Alright, so we've drained all the water out of the system. The next job then is to get our new pipes fitted.
Yeah, fit all the new pipes, obviously changed it all over.
We've used silicone hoses. We'll put the part numbers on the screen and they're available from Bearmac. So whilst we're leaving Brett to fit all the new hoses, we'll take a look at this, the Evans prep fluid. Now we'll need to put this in next before we put the waterless coolant in. What this stuff does is it goes around the engine, hunting out the last bits of water. We've drained off the system, but there'll still be a reasonable amount in there. So we'll put this in, check for leaks, make sure Brett's done a good job of fitting the hoses. So we've refilled the cooling system now with the prep fluid, exactly the same as we would have done if it was just water. We don't need to have it filled to the brim this time because we're just going to run it up hot and drain it straight back out again. Evans do say we don't need to put the cap on the radiator, we need to let the air come out back through the system. So let's run the vehicle up so it's nice and warm now. We'll get all the water and all the air out of the system. We've filled the cooling system with prep fluid, run it up so the engine's nice and hot now, and Brett's just draining the last of it out and getting us ready to fill up with the PowerCool 180 waterless coolant. With this stuff, we're not going to add any water or any antifreeze to it, so if you had any leaks during that priming phase, just get those cured at this point because we don't want to be adding water to this afterwards. It's always advised to, they do this stuff in a little half a litre or 1 litre tub as well. I reckon get some of that just for topping it up. We don't want to add water to this, but Evans do say in the emergency, if you ever something horrendous happen, you can fill it up with water to get yourself home. So we're going to go ahead, fill this up normal, just as if it were water, and crack on, happy motoring. And that concludes this coolant change. So all in all, we swapped out our water coolants for Evans waterless coolant. We changed the hoses and Jubilee clips along the way. On difficulty rating, Brett, what do you reckon to that? How hard was that?
Straightforward really, just hoses and clips and screws.
Yeah.
Straightforward.
The only tools we needed was a screwdriver or socket to undo the Jubilee clips.
And the wire brush to clean all the terminals before we put the pipes on, that's it really.
You got it. And how long do you reckon these pipes and that will last now before we need to?
Obviously the pipes should last quite a while now, obviously as long as you keep them clean and they don't get contaminated or anything, they should last the life of the vehicle, I thought.
Yeah. And so Evans say the same with the coolants as well. We've gone through the prep fluid process, we've gone through putting the waterless coolant in now. We've run the engine up to temperature a bit, but is there anything we need to do to keep an eye on it? Yeah, if I was you, I'd take it out for a good run. Once it's run up to temperature and the thermostat's open, just get back home and check the level, obviously when it's cool, so not when it's warm. That's it. So fingers crossed now, we should be set for the rest of this engine's life. And we've been running the waterless coolant in our Defender for the last few weeks now. We've even switched off the electric fan and jacked it up the radiator, get some temperature in there, and true to its word, it hasn't boiled over. This is one of those things that's prevention is better than cure, and we've been quite impressed with it so far. It's certainly going to save us a headache in the future. Now next up, last week we heard from Sean Conway, the endurance adventurer, in part 1 of our short series on him. This week we're going to take a look at, what he's got coming up in the future and big adventure. Let's head over to Sean.
No great story ever started with, on a bright sunny day. It's always when it's raining and cold and miserable, and those are the cool stories and what you really get out of an adventure, I think. And what better place to do an adventure is in winter, in the Arctic Circle. It's going to be miserable, so that's where I'm heading. Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying a bit of snow winter driving. I'm going to get some snow tyres this week, which should be fun. And I just like the idea of man and machine, taking the Land Rover into the Arctic, see how it copes with the cold, and then see how I cope with the cold by doing a triathlon in the Arctic. And as far as I know, no one has ever done a winter Arctic triathlon ever, which is surprising because you know, it's not that long. It only takes a couple of hours. So, you know, I'm sure some crazy Norwegians have done it, but it'd be nice to do it and film it properly, and then see how I cope. When it comes to an off-road vehicle, I've never even considered anything else but a Land Rover, and that's, you know what, it's nothing to do with. I mean, there's some amazing off-road vehicles out there. I just don't love them. You know, I haven't fallen in love with them. They weren't part of my childhood. Often when people want to go on an adventure, they think of going abroad, but actually there's so much to do in the UK that is just as adventurous. You know, a few years ago I did the 3 Peaks Cycle Challenge, which is amazing. Over 3 days you've got to cycle between Snowdonia, Scafell and Ben Nevis. It's 150 miles a day plus a climb in each 24-hour period, and that was one of the most amazing little adventures over a long weekend that you can do. And you know, once you get into Scotland and all those massive mountains and it's freezing cold, and again it's just, you do feel way more adventurous getting home, finding a pub, sitting down, the fire's going, you think, oh, you know, I actually achieved something today. and there's so much of it. You know, go out to West Wales, or you go into the Hebrides and that sort of thing, and there's a lot out there. And I think people do often think too much about going abroad to have an adventure, but you know what, the greats in Great Britain's here for a reason, because it's a pretty awesome island. You know, I've said it before, I'll say it again, you know, adventure isn't always about climbing mountains or rowing oceans. Adventure in its purest form is simply a way of thinking, I think, you know. And I'm not gonna lie, it does help if you're single and you don't have a family to go off on these big adventures, but I don't think you need to do all the big adventures to get, you know, feel that you've achieved something. You know, you can just go for a weekend, like, you know, doing the 3 Peaks Cycle Challenge. That was an incredible adventure, and it took 3 days of my time. And you know, you don't always have to go off and do these month-long expeditions and things like that. Annoyingly, those are the ones I like to do. So, you know, I'm still young, so you know, who knows what I'm going to do when I've settled down a little bit more. Maybe I'll never settle down. Who knows? My advice for people is just take that first step, take the leap. You know, a lot of people sit at home and they're like, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? You know, it's obviously a famous saying, regret the things you do rather than the things you don't. And you know, taking that first step is always difficult. And you know what I do? I go to the pub with all my mates and I actually verbalise what I've got in my mind and these ideas. And you know, you're always quite nervous that your friends will go, oh, don't do this, don't do that. But actually, I think your friends will be often the most supportive. Some won't, you know. There's some family members that might not like your life choices. But actually, I think verbalising it and getting out there and committing is the first thing you can do. Is it critical to have a beard? It's honestly, my beard has got more publicity than anything else I've ever done. You know, swimming Britain, no. Having a beard for jellyfish stings, yes. I'm just lazy. You know, I couldn't be bothered to carrying a razor, to be honest. It does help in the cold, I think. I don't know. I'm not really sure why I have a beard. It's kind of something I've had for the last couple of years.
Another great insight there by Sean. In the next episode of Land Rovers Live, which incidentally will be going out on Christmas Day, we'll get the last in this short series of pieces with Sean Conway, where we'll be taking a look at exactly what he's got in his Defender and how he's prepped it for expedition. And coming up next, if you're like me, you just don't have time for the big adventures that Sean does, then maybe Sally Pawlowski from Frontrunner will have a few bits of inspiration for you.
Adventure is what it is to you, and for some people that's a big vision. For some people that is the total aspiration of driving to the ends of the earth and back. I might do that when I retire, but life it's not achievable for most people. The cost, the time, you know, the vehicle, whatever it is. So, you know, I use my Frontrunner gear everywhere. So at weekends, you know, we might have an adventure where we're going off to watch a rugby tournament because the kids are playing, and I'll take my chairs and I'll take my tent because it's good for shoving injured children in halfway through matches. You know, it might be a case of going along to a green laning event. It might be just going to a show and catching up with friends, and that's kind of most of the camping I've done this year actually is just at shows because it's just been too busy to do anything else. But all the time I'm inspired by other people and other people's stories, and all the time thinking, what would be my ultimate trip? And I've got in my head what that is, but it's a long attainment and it's a long way off. So for me, like next year, I want to do Scottish Highlands. Like I've never been, and it's somewhere I really want to go to. And I've been inspired by the Land Rover Hibernauts and some of the pictures that I've seen. So that for me, that's next year. So that's for me, adventures are on my own doorstep, sharing other people's adventures and having my long-term goal, which hopefully I'll attain. Just started getting into geocaching as it's taking you places you wouldn't normally get to go, and those sort of little treasure hunt ideas that inspire everybody. So it may just be a day somewhere and being out and about and lots of fresh air and rosy cheeks and a packed lunch. It may be staying overnight somewhere, sticking the rooftop tent on, getting the awning out. But that's great, but we're restricted here in this country because we can't wild camp. That's where, for me, little mini adventures really come in, is if you can actually just pop a tent up somewhere and have some fun. So campsites are great, and then obviously looking at the provision there is there for the children and being able to maximise the time that you have and being inspired by other people's little adventures. And one of the nicest thing about the sort of the Land Rover fraternity as it is I've met so many people amongst, over the years who are in similar situations. You've had your car, I want to do this, I want to do that. Kids have come along and, I can't do any of that anymore. You can, you just have to be better prepared. I think we build up all these barriers as to why we can't do something, because I need this and I need that, and what if a lion was to jump on the car in Wiltshire? What do I need to prepare myself? You don't need anything, you just need the confidence in yourself that you can do something, whatever it is. You just need the basics. Somewhere to sleep, somewhere to cook, somewhere to drink. It completely depends where you're going. But I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs applies to overlanding, camping, or spending the rest of your life on the road. And in fact, if you look at some of the most seasoned overlanders, they've shed kit along the way. In fact, when I was in Johannesburg last week, I met a guy who'd spent 3.5 years travelling down from the Netherlands in a Defender. And I went to look in the back, and the first thing he said was, my car didn't look like this when I left the Netherlands. And I said, really? He said, yeah, I had a lot more kit then. And we've bartered or got rid of a lot on the way down because actually we realised we didn't need it. So I think for anybody, I would say start with the basics. What are the basics that you need to feel comfortable? You don't, a lot of people need things because it's a security blanket, but what do you really need? It's a bit like sort of desert island sort of discs type style is, and then what could go in room 101? Because a lot of the time you hear, I bought this, but I really didn't need it. But I used this and I got this from the pound shop and this is perfect. So it's an individual thing, but just as long as your basics are covered, you'll have so much more fun and you'll be able to go so much further, especially if you're going on a big overland trip, with money. Imagine if you saved $5,000 on kitting out your car. Get the basics right. Good solid roof rack, good tyres. Make sure it's mechanically sound. Make sure you've got spares for things like suspension and the common things that go wrong. Make sure you've got a comfy bed or a sleeping bag, and just go and enjoy wherever it is, even if it is just up the road.
And we'd love to hear where your next adventure is going to take you, whether it be a round the world trip or just a weekend micro adventure. In the next episode of Land Rovers Live, it'll be our last of the show, and we're going to take a look back at some of our favourite bits throughout the year. Do let us know what your favourite moments are. Maybe you had a great time at one of the shows, or some particularly good days out laning. Maybe you did a small adventure of your own. Do let us know. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll try and feature you in the show. That's pretty well it for this week. And as always, you can keep in contact with us by the links below, Facebook, Twitter, and all the other usual places. We're always on the hunt for contributors, so if you've got a little bit of time and you, think you're okay at writing about Land Rovers or things that Land Rover people will enjoy, do let us know. And as always, let us know what you think of what we're doing. Comments boxes below, or you can fire away on Facebook, Twitter, and all the usual places. Coming up over the next few weeks, we've got some really interesting features. We test out the 2015 Range Rover Evoque autobiography and get a bit scratched up along the way as well. We've also got some really other interesting overland and green laning trips coming up as well, so do stay tuned. And as I've mentioned many times before, if there's something you think we've forgotten, do let us know. and we'll see you on Christmas Day.